Welcome to Americana Archives. Today we have part 2 of the story with the headline, Making a Brain for a Gallant Fire Horse, with the subheadline, Though trained to be as wise as he is brave, he must die unhonored or drag a truck after his day of glory is ended. It says, Training for the Engine. Up to this point, everything about the training of a fire horse devolves upon us here in the stables. But the actual training for the engine run is taught right in the houses of the fire companies. We have just so many horses on hand at headquarters up here, and when a captain of a fire company wants a horse, he comes up here and gives notice. He brings his driver with him, and together the men look over the horses on hand. Perhaps it is a gray that is wanted, or it may be a bay or a sorrel, to match the other horses already down at the company. The captain picks out his own horse, and we send it to him on a final 30 days trial, for the examination up till now is scarcely half complete. From the moment a new fire horse lands with a company, he is one of that company, and must take his run with the engine, no matter how little he may know. In case of a fire, the men have to get the green one hooked up somehow, quick as possible, and are obliged to start out with him. Therefore, no sooner a horse is added to a company than they begin to train him to run in answer to the gong. At first, he is led from the stall with the tap of the big bell. If he does not move quickly enough, a tap with a whip from the rear teaches him he is to come out on a run. Before 2 days have passed, the horse knows pretty well what is expected of him, especially when he sees the other horses run. Often, in fact, all that is necessary is to tap the bell, and the new horse will run of himself with the old ones, catching the excitement and becoming more and more interested in the work. The only trouble is to get a horse to know that he is to stand under the harness at his own position at the tongue, and that he is not to demoralize the other horses by getting into their places. There have been instances of very intelligent animals that require but 3 days to get thoroughly broken in. From 6 to 8 days, however, is near the time necessary to break a horse into running before the engine. In some cases, as long as 10 or 12 days are necessary. But much needs to be learned by the new horse, besides the training he requires inside the engine house. His courage must be tested, whether he will go where pointed, no matter how frightened he may be. The screeching of engine whistles, the crash of falling walls, and the roar of the flames of a conflagration. To all this, he must become accustomed, or show promise of becoming accustomed. And if he does not within the prescribed limit of 30 days, the captain has the privilege of bringing the horse back. Moreover, a horse may develop an annoying habit of stamping during the night, or during the daytime, thus keeping awake the firemen, who may have been out on duty through half the night, and anxious to catch a few hours' sleep directly overhead. Another annoyance of this sort is the habit of biting or chopping the bit, or rubbing it up against the side of the stall. If the horse is unsatisfactory in any of these respects, he is brought back to us, and we keep him and try him on 1 or 2 other fire captains. And if he continues coming back to us, we send word to the contractor that we have had the use of his horse for nothing for 30 days, and that after all, he must try to sell him elsewhere. You see, a fire horse needs to be a pretty perfect and well-behaved sort of an animal if he wants to work for this city. And when you get a horse that answers all our requirements, you are apt to have a pretty good one, whether he costs you $250 or $1,250. Have you many horses in the hospital? Was asked. Come to the top floor and see, said the chief, leading the way up spiral stairs toward the top floor of the handsome brick 3-story building. Last year, we treated 110 horses up here. Out of that number, we finally had to shoot 30. 25 were patched up as good enough to be sold at auction, and the rest were restored to their original companies, good as ever, and a little wiser for their experiences. What are the chief causes of injury? Electric surface cars and elevated railroad pillars. The pillars are all right, but persons and wagons get into the way, and a driver has got to head himself and his horses and engine into a pillar to save a human life or lives. And you'd be surprised how hard some of the men take it. We had a horse here not long ago that was torn open from one knee almost to his back, where he had come up against the edge of a pillar. He ought to have been shot on the spot, but the men of the company and the driver of the horse fairly begged us to save him if we could, and we did our best. We had him for 3 months until, when he seemed on the road to recovery, blood poisoning set in, and we had to kill him. In the hospital. "This is our hospital," said the chief, pushing open a door at the head of the stairway. "I don't suppose there's another place like it in the world." The room was bright and airy, extending clear across the top floor of the building. Along its 4 sides, handsome box stalls glittering with polished brass and freshly varnished were located, and each stall contained a patient. Strong-limbed, mild-eyed, the fine big animals stood or lay at rest and at peace with the world and themselves. One immense gray poked his nose through the bars of the stall and asked to be petted. The chief affectionately passed a hand across the great soft nose. "I don't know that I ever had a horse I hated more to let go than this one, but it's no use trying longer with him," he said. "He looks perfectly well, and one of the finest, strongest, best dispositioned horses I have ever seen is Joe. But his hind off ankle is swollen, and I can't get it down. He's been here 4 times before with the same complaint, and no sooner he gets well than he's chased to a fire and the swelling starts all over again. He's a good horse in every other respect. Why, he'll bring $150 at auction, condemned as he is. But it seems a pity to turn a fellow like that into a truck horse and to have him spend the rest of his days feeling sore at you for it." In a far corner of the stall, suspended by a canvas sling strung under his belly, hung a magnificent sorrel, feet barely off the floor. The animal's head hung low, as his eyes were closed, and his nose approached his forefeet, as if he were in severe pain. "That poor fellow," Mr. Shea said, "was brought in here last night with a wretched foot. I'll pull him through in 6 or 8 weeks, but he is in severe pain. We get them here in pretty bad shape sometimes. Sometimes they come in scorched. I had one like that about 2 years ago. His engine was fast to the hydrant during the big East Side cigar box factory fire. And before his driver could get him free, the flames had passed over him and burned every square inch of him except the eyes. We had a hard time pulling that chap through, but we did in the end. We just lathered him from head to tail in soft soap, lime water, and oil, and before long, we had him resting easy and on the mend. I don't suppose there is a more satisfactory job in existence than the one I have. Attending to the wants of any sick animal is interesting enough. But when it comes to a great big intelligent fire horse that fairly speaks to you with his eyes, that comes to know you when you bring him relief, and that seems all but human, then you feel you are doing something in the world. But there is one thing I haven't, and which I never expect to see, and that is some great big green pasture where a crippled fire horse may kick up his poor heels and roll on the grass and live the rest of his days. Ever since I can remember, there has been talk of pensioning the old fire horses. As long as I can look ahead, the talk will continue, but the pension will never come before the automobile has come to displace the fire horse. Short of your mother, your wife, and your sister, the finest thing living is the fire horse, from training stable to hospital. This story came from the great state of New York, being reported in the New York Times of March 6, 1904. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we will see you next time on Americana Archives.